So welcome to our annual Careers After Cinema Studies panel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott Richmond. I'm the Associate Director Undergraduate of the Cinema Studies Institute. And in addition, I also run what was previously known as the McLuhan Center, the Center for Culture and Technology here at U of T. I am going to start by acknowledging the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. So what you are here for is our annual Careers After Cinema Studies panel, where we invite alumni from the Cinema Studies Institute to come back and talk about what they've been doing since and how they got to where they are. I am absolutely delighted to be able to introduce our panelists for this session. Peter Kuplowsky, and this is in no particular order, it's in the order it was in the email we sent out. Peter Kuplowsky is a film curator, producer, and writer based in Toronto. Since 2005, he has established a career championing genre cinema and outsider art at various international film festivals. He is currently the lead programmer for the Toronto International Film Festival's Midnight Madness section. Over the past few years, Kuplowsky has helped develop and produce a number of critically acclaimed short and feature films with emerging filmmakers that he supported on the festival circuit as a programmer. His producer and credits include The ABCs of Death, Part 2, The Interior, The Void, Climate of the Hunter, PG, Psycho Goreman, is that how you say that? Goreman? Agnes, Country Gold, and The Artifice Girl. Peter completed a Cinema Studies Specialist in 2009, followed by an MA from the Cinema Studies Institute in 2010. Brandon Bastaldo is the digital production manager for Loblaw Digital's online grocery, where he manages a team of digital production specialists. He graduated in 2012 with a major in cinema studies. And Lindsay Blair Goeldner is a film producer and karaoke enthusiast. Oh, we're going to have a good time. Based in Toronto. After completing the Producer Lab program at the Canadian Film Centre in 2019, she teamed up with fellow Producer Lab alumni Shant Joshi to form Faye Pictures as the director of production. She is currently lead producing and providing production oversight to several projects, including a drag queen coming-of-age story, Queen Tut, feature-length art documentary, The Archivist, 2-episode dramedies, Streams Flow from a River, and Degrees of Separation. Her previous credits include There's No Place Like This Place, Any Place, Learn to Swim, Death Valley, and Salmon Pink, among others. In September 2022, 3 of her films had their world premieres at the Toronto International Film Festival, including domestic thriller Diaspora, trans-led drama Scaring Women at Night, and video store coming-of-age dramedy I Like Movies, which we will be having a screening of in a few short weeks. When she's not on set or at a karaoke night, you can find her recommending movies on TikTok. Lindsay graduated in 2013 as a cinema studies specialist. I also would really love to thank both the Innis AV staff and Denise Ng for supporting this event. I couldn't do it without you. And I am so excited to talk to Brandon, Peter, and Lindsay. So without further ado, I am just going to ask each of the panelists to start by narrating how they got from graduating from cinema studies to where they are now. And I'm going to start just in the order that you've shown up on my screen. Peter, would you go first?
Sure. My career as a film festival curator began kind of in tandem with my my enrollment at University of Toronto. When I was 19, I was doing the cinema studies undergrad program. I ended up specializing in cinema studies and doing literary studies as a minor. And while I was there, I was working at a movie theater known as the Blair Cinema, now known as the Hot Docs, Ted Rogers Cinema. And while I was working at the Blair, I was introduced, a volunteer introduced me, who was working at who was helping out at a film festival at the theater, introduced me to an individual who was starting a film festival called Toronto After Dark, and mentioned that I should, encourage me to volunteer. And so I started volunteering for that festival, and ended up becoming, they just didn't have anyone to pre-screen short films, because one of my advices for anyone who wants to get into curation is that for good and for ill, sometimes film festivals don't actually really care that much about short films, insofar that they love getting the submission fees, but they don't necessarily care what plays. So I found myself in a position to start exercising my taste as a curator with a lot of autonomy and very little oversight. And so and it was a startup festival. So there was just it was kind of just initially a one-man operation, and then he brought in a bunch of people, including me, to help out. And while that was happening, and I started, getting involved with the concept of curation as an actual job, I was studying at University at U of T, and then I joined the Cinema Studies Student Union, in which there was another opportunity to curate through the Free Friday Film Series. And I got really passionate about seeking out obscure movies, really taking advantage of the fact that this was an organization with a considerable budget and the ability to connect with archives and find stuff that wasn't playing. And my philosophy at the time was, what was I jealous that was playing in New York or LA or Austin, some of these other indie film hubs, and then what could I bring to Toronto? And by doing so, in conjunction, all through my undergrad, I began just kind of, finding opportunities to, screen movies. I remember at one point when I was doing my master's, I found out about how deep the 35 millimeter archive specifically is in the media commons, and I would ask professors if I could curate supplementary screening programs just because I wanted to look at the prints. And very few people came to these screenings, but I would just sit there and watch like 4 Taiwanese melodramas in a row. And so I was just doing a lot of this stuff, forwalling events, and it put me on the radar of Colin Geddes, who was the Midnight Madness programmer at the Toronto International Film Festival for the last 20 years. And the first event that I think he noticed me was I was forwalling at the Blair Cinema where I was working screenings of Troll 2, which is an infamous bad movie. And he attended that event, was kind of like, who's this young guy that's doing these events? And then I reached out to him because Colin had an extensive collection of Kung Fu films. And so that's how we developed our friendship there. And as I was wrapping up my master's, he invited me to be an intern for a film festival that he was working on in North Carolina. I followed him there, did 2 years of that with him. And when that festival wrapped, he invited me to be his assistant at the Toronto International Film Festival. But at that point, I had actually already started doing some work at TIFF, because while I was a cinema studies student, I wrote a lot about video games and tried to discuss the intersection of gaming and film. And at that time, TIFF actually had a gaming initiative called TIFF Nexus that they had started up. It only ran for about 2 to 3 years, unfortunately, but that was sort of my first foot in the door, because I had this intersection of video games and film. And then in terms of how the producing came into it, because after that it was sort of organic. Like I worked with Colin for 5 years, and then when he retired, I was in a lucky position to be offered the Midnight Madness role, which was really a dream come true. It was something that when I first started going to Midnight Madness, I never really thought that could be a job, and so I feel really lucky to have that. If they have questions later.
It always meanders. There's 2 things I just want to say. That I once organized a conference in graduate school just so I could rent a print of a particular film. Like I did the whole scene of an academic conference, invited people, a keynote, and it was all just an excuse to rent a 35 millimeter print.
I wanted to show Dave Foley's The Wrong Guy for a friend of mine that was and who loved the movie dearly. And at the time, the rights were very nebulous, and so the university wouldn't let me loan it outside of an academic context. So I did write a paper on The Wrong Guy to recite in front of the movie so that me and my friend could watch it.
Excellent.
But that's sort of if there's a lesson to the story, it's just I frequently just tried to find my own opportunities for the things that I wanted to do. And I said yes to the opportunities that came. And I really do owe a lot to the Cinema Studies Student Union in terms of giving me a lot of freedom to kind of try things out and fail and then succeed in other in the sort of world of film exhibition and film presentation.
Yeah, and sometimes you're in a screening and nobody comes, and that's fine too, because at least you get to watch the movie. Actually, I'm gonna go out of order because actually, Lindsay, can I ask you to go next to give us the brief trajectory?
Hi. I guess the question is, how did I get to where I am now from cinema studies? I graduated in 2013, was a specialist in cinema studies and a minor in English. I didn't know I wanted to get into film. I'm definitely one of those people who like, this is accidental, didn't plan it, had no idea when I was leaving high school what I wanted to do. I took a year off. I was working at the Condom Shack at the time, if anyone remembers iconic Queen Street West back then. And I just like took a year to like travel, work at Condom Shack. And I applied to schools, you know, I had decent grades. I got into U of T and I was like, I'm going to study cinema studies because I spent a lot of time watching movies growing up. And I was like, well, maybe I really liked academia and I thought maybe that would be my path. So I kind of thought, well, I'll go down the academic path and see where that takes me. And I really enjoyed my time at school, but I also figured out pretty quickly that I didn't want to go down the academia path. In fact, the career that I really idolized when I was at Innis was the career that Peter has. I dreamed of being a film programmer. Basically, if I could watch movies and be paid to do it without writing too much, or even like, I never wanted to make them. I didn't want to write too much. I just wanted to talk about them at length. That was my dream job. So while I was at Innis, I got word that Queen Video was going to be hiring soon. And I was like, sick, let's do it. So I ended up putting in a resume there. I always worked while I was at school full time. So first it was Condom Shack, then I moved to Queen Video. And that was like dream job. So I was like, how do I make this my career? I ended up, as I was leaving U of T, I ended up doing some contracts with different film festivals, including Toronto After Dark and TIFF and Hot Docs. And I kind of made like a little career of like video store most of the time, and then seasonal contract work with different film festivals. I grew up in Toronto and I was living at home when I was going to university. And another thing that was in the back of my mind, besides being like pretty movie obsessed, was New York obsessed. So I kept trying to kind of step into the States. Like my goal was really just like, if I could watch movies in New York, like that's the dream. That's all I want to really aspire to. So I took a couple under the table festival contracts in the States. I did some stuff at a couple of them. I'll just say I was working at Kuplowsky. It was great regional film festival in North Carolina, if anyone's interested. Love that film festival. And it was there that I ran into a friend of mine who's an American producer, pal of mine. We met I think we met at TIFF in like 2013. And she was like, hey, I'm working for this company in New York. They're looking for like a video, like junior producer. Do you want to do it? And I was like, they would hire a Canadian? She's like, yeah, you want to interview? And they flew me out, did this really weird interview for an education technology company. I basically like, I mean, I kind of lied to get this like job, but my whole goal was just like get to New York. They ended up hiring me, sponsoring my J1 visa. And that was my first time being on set. A lot of the stuff that I was doing at film festivals contract wise had to do with either some short film programming, social media management, event management. And I found that a lot of the on-set producing production work, I kind of started in a PC role, moved up to PM and then producer role. It was very similar in terms of like handling logistics, being in charge of a budget. And I realized I really liked that stuff. I didn't want to be in charge of the creative. Rather, I liked getting a concept handed to me and then executing within those certain parameters. So I spent a year and a half in New York on that visa. It ended. Trump became president. So I came home. And then the job that I found myself with, or that I could get from the work experience I had in New York, was commercial line production. So I worked both in-house with an ad agency, and then I moved to a vendor production company that works in commercials. So I was producing commercials. And I mean, it's funny now because I like make short films for like literally the budget of like, 2 PAs on a commercial project, but much more fulfilling now. So after like 2 years of commercial production, I kind of was totally tired out. I had a really miserable boss at the last one. And I just kind of quit. And that was when I took a really wonderful meeting with a friend of mine, Jennifer Shin, who was like, you should consider the Canadian Film Centre. I knew I wanted to make things that were more meaningful. And I had decided that production was the path I wanted to go down. So I figured I would find out how to finance and make movies and shows. So I went to the CFC. And again, it was one of those things that like, certainly I wouldn't say it's a necessary move if you want to get into film production at at all, but it was a great way to meet people who were doing the stuff I wanted to do. And it's how I met my business partner, Shant Joshi, who's the president of Faye Pictures. And I've recently, my role has changed to VP of production because I got my artist visa and I've moved to New York. So now I'm here and I'm kind of overseeing production, both in the States and in Canada. And we have our first big international co-production going to camera next year. That's a South Africa, Irish and Canadian co-production. So how did I get here from CSI? I stumbled until I found there were two parameters. It was watch movies and live in New York. And I just did everything I could to do those two things. And then because I still idolize Peter's job, I do that on TikTok. So I talk about obscure films on TikTok. I don't get paid. I just love it because that was like my other dream. So I still do it online.
Thank you, Lindsay. And finally, Brandon, how did you get from CSI to where you are now?
I really started just in my undergrad. Actually, my interest really fell on film criticism. So, I was doing a double major in English and film studies. And at the time, I was part of CINSU, so that's Cinema Studies Union, and just really was interested actually in what film critics do. So what I started to do was I started writing for a lot of the papers around campus, the varsity, pretty much anyone who would take my writing, CINSU, the Herald, etc. I find some old copies with my name on it or some film reviews. And that was kind of my intro into how to maybe make a career out of what I was learning. I really enjoyed it. It was really interesting. I think I was, still doing my undergrad, but going to these feeling really privileged, like getting to go to these film screenings for sometimes like really big films with critics like, Peter Howell, etc., or like different people who are working for really big publications sitting right beside me. And it was really fun. It also gave me like a really unfiltered, view into what that work is like. And it's something that really put me on the fence for a few reasons about being in the industry in that way, at least. So the first thing just to call out is, I'd go to a lot of film screenings and notice that, hey, I'm probably the only Black person here in a film theater. And for me, that really mattered because positive and negative. The negative in the sense of like, it's not about why aren't there more people like me in this industry or interested in being in this industry or making it onto these publications. Can I really get there? But the other conversation that made more interesting for me was, and also through talking to different people, I think this is actually some advice that Peter Howell had actually given me, was a good way to make your way as in film criticism would be to really focus on niches. What do you know specifically that other people don't know? Or types of films that you really like. I know Peter mentioned like Colin Geddes, for example, who I chatted with him a few times as well. And I know he was like really into Kung Fu. I've been to a few of his different screenings that that was his thing. And so for me, that was something that I really focused on. And so coming out of school, I kind of was a little bit disillusioned with like the whole film criticism bit. It just didn't seem like a place that I maybe could make big advances in, for the reasons of like, if you pick up the Toronto Star now, I'm pretty sure Peter Howell is still the head critic there, and like a lot of the positions, there's didn't seem like a ton of space and room there. But what I started to do was I actually started interning for a company, Toronto-based, called Trend Hunter. But I really started producing a lot of content online. I started writing for a lot of online blogs, reviewing hip hop, reviewing things that I actually really liked quite a bit, and I felt like I knew a lot about. And that was really interesting for me because it's one of those things. I feel like this is like a kind of constant in my career where, and I really kind of say this to a lot of people who ask me for advice about, where to go next, etc. Is really never undervalue the small moments of things that you learn, because you'll be surprised how they come back to shape your career later. And a good example about that is, through writing through these different websites, writing for this like company called Trend Hunter, where they're basically mass producing content online. If you had told me like, hey, that's what your career is going to be based on like 10 years later, I'd be like, what, are you kidding me? I would have never guessed that. So, and I actually ended up working for a real estate company that was actually bought by Yellow Pages. It's just like super old school because I don't even know if Yellow Pages is around anymore. But where my career really transitioned there, which was very interesting for me, was my job was about producing content for them, so writing stories, etc. But then I started to recognize, like through working with their product teams, their tech teams, that I actually have a lot of experience understanding how on the back end of a website, how people are supposed to be able to rapidly produce content and get things online, what the best practices are there, but also how can we make this faster so that we can all do our jobs faster. Fast forward to now, I've worked a few different roles since then, a couple project management roles, a product role, etc. But now what I do is I work for Loblaw's, for Loblaw Digital. So that's the digital portion of Loblaw's. And here I do have a team, and basically what we do is all the content you see on all of our sites. I work with our product teams to help make sure that we're able to do that in an efficient way. Ways that meet accessibility best practices for folks, but also beyond that, how do we do this so that we can scale and produce even more content in a quick and fast way? And so, in a nutshell, like I think it's pretty similar to like what Lindsay mentioned, where kind of got here in a strange way. I say that I still have film like in my heart. I sometimes daydream is like maybe one day I'll go back to my initial dream from like when I was like 10 years old of being like a music video director. But ultimately, like really just try to follow just opportunities that popped up and trying to be open-minded about how things I learned in school can then be applied to the tech world. And yeah, that's how I ended up here.
What did you learn in cinema studies that helped you get to where you are? And I want to, in particular, I would love to know, and at CSI does not have to mean inside the classroom, right? I think that's really important. It could be extracurriculars. But in your time at U of T, what did you learn that helps you, that you think about where you are now? And in particular, something that you would be like, your undergraduate self might be surprised that this was something that you're doing or that is relevant. And so we'll just go in the same order. Peter, if you don't mind.
One thing that I've reflected on a lot that has helped me considerably in both presenting films as an exhibitor through a festival, but also in production, is simply being able to write about film, frankly, to be able to do closed readings of films, to succinctly get to the heart of what a film is about, both either to sell it or to sell someone on investing in it. What I have noticed, it's one of the reasons why I've begun working a lot more with filmmakers, and I do kind of foresee potentially a trajectory going in towards either, if not a management position, is a position that I would call a creative lobbyist, in that there are filmmakers that are very bad at talking about their own work. It's why they make movies. It's they made the movie so they wouldn't have to talk about it. I think David Lynch did something to that effect once. But it's true. A lot of filmmakers just, some filmmakers are great and they can do it and that's awesome. Then they don't need me. But some of the filmmakers that I work with can't be bothered to sit and pitch their movie. They'd rather just be on set making it. And I have found that, to write a pitch deck is not unlike putting together a research paper for that's an academic research paper. I mean, you can have maybe you can be maybe a little less rigorous. You can make up some stuff because filmmaking is sometimes a bit of a con game. But I frequently even returned to some of my academic papers to be like, how did I phrase this, or what did I do this, to try and sort of sell the artistic merits of the production that I'm working on. And then extracurricular, again, I can't stress enough how valuable Sinsu was as both a community and as an organization, and how I feel like there were many opportunities to exercise curation and film presentation in many different ways. And it wasn't just Free Friday Films. I remember while I was there, we set up like a satellite program in room 222 for like really, really strange stuff. And that over time actually was very much contributed to a series that I started running with another friend called the Laser Blast Film Society, which was a monthly series at the Royal. and I mean, there's many alumni too that I still work with. I mean, I still run into Lindsay all the time. And so the community of people that I built there, and there's it's a diverse community insofar that like people went into a lot of different fields too. So I feel like there have been a lot of opportunities to reach out to folks that have either gone into digital media or specifically advertising, marketing, and as well as film festivals and as well as film production, visual effects. I know people that now work, at visual effects houses that started in Sinsu. But I think the core thing for me is that I think CSI really prepared me on how to talk about the medium confidently.
Thank you. Lindsay.
I was a quiet kid before I went to U of T. I mean, I was working at the Condom Shack, but I was like, I never raised my hand in class in high school. I just got good grades and I spent weekends watching movies. But when I went to U of T, I remember getting into my first fight with another student who spoke over me. And there wasn't a lot of, other female identifying folks in my class. And I didn't fight. Like, I didn't say anything in the moment, but afterwards I pulled him aside because I was so mad that he spoke over me with his opinion. And so in a few ways, I think U of T or my time at CSI like really helped me to find my voice and use it, and gave me like the language and toolkit to kind of express myself. I've always been a critical thinker. And my parents, very like leftist liberal arts like parents. My mom's an art teacher in the public school system in Toronto. She's great. And she always told me to like, be a critical viewer. But obviously that was expanded upon at CSI. Remember House Hippo? I was talking about that PSA on my TikTok recently, media literacy. It really gave me the kind of tools to understand like how things are represented in media and how that becomes like a reflection of the culture. So while I probably didn't see it at the time, now with my role at Fay Pictures, and certainly while I was in the commercial industry, I just kept bumping into issues of representation across the board. Like as a queer identifying woman, cis woman, I just felt like, wow, there's so few avenues for underrepresented voices to find themselves reflected on screens. And what does it mean to see yourself when you're a young person, watching a lot of movies, consuming a lot of media? So part of what kind of pushed me out of commercial work was I had a really bad boss. And I remember thinking, it was just so easy to put that money towards good. Like we're making ads for McDonald's or Apple, it's not that hard to like do something interesting, but there's so many old guards in place. And she had like a really whatever, but she told me I was too nice to make it as a producer. And I kind of let that fuel me as I went into the CFC and decided this would be my trajectory. I wanted to see stories on screen that I hadn't seen before. I'm not saying everything I have to work on has to have this, carry this weight or this importance, but it's really not so hard to just like make a difference in that capacity. So everything that we do at Fay Pictures, like our kind of whole ethos is decolonize Hollywood. And it doesn't just mean what you see on screen. It's also like our crewing practices, like as a manager, like basically as the boss on set, like who do I hire for these jobs? Who do I put in the room together? I want the crew on set to see themselves reflected on screen, but I want the actors in front of the camera to see themselves reflected in our crew. I think CSI really helped me to kind of define, or at least begin to define, my relationship with media, the toolkit with which I talk about film. And, I think it is a little surprising because certainly when I was at Innis, I did not think I'd be making movies, but I can see how, I took the feminism in film class. I took experimental cinema. I did the Hong Kong abroad with Bart Testa, and I became obsessed with Hong Kong cinema. It gave me so many things that like I find I call back to now in our references and the work we choose, the collaborators we choose to work with. So it's funny how I can see the through lines.
Thank you. Let's get righteous. All right. Brandon.
Yeah, for sure. So I think one thing I'll just put it out there in the open. I feel like I was never, from an academia standpoint, never a great student in that way. What I mean is like I would write a lot of essays, especially just thinking about cinema studies, like tons of essays. And I feel like sometimes my point would get across, sometimes it wouldn't, etc. And so I think like when I was younger, I found that challenging and frustrating because I think I knew that I had a point of view about a lot of these films that I was watching. And actually, Lindsay brought up something really interesting, which is like the whole in-class experience. Because when I started my cinema studies, like my degree, like my first year, quiet as a mouse in class, like in our tutorials. Don't really have too much to say per se, but I would every now and then hear people say things about maybe their point of view of films, and I'd be like, fundamentally, I don't agree with that. Or maybe sometimes things that were even, I mean, this was like also a different time too, where people I think maybe would say things that I don't know if they would say now, or it would be as admissible sometimes even in class. I remember having a class where like a classmate, we were talking about a film that had like a slavery narrative in it. And someone's like, oh, like this whole slavery narrative thing, it's like so old. Like, why are we still talking about it? And to me, I actually, on a side note, this is very layered, but like, I do think it's a bit overtrodden, like in terms of from a film standpoint. At the same time, there's still people who are enslaved right now on our planet. So I don't really know that you can really say something like that. And so I'm just saying this because I think for me, that was one of the first places I really kind of built a bit of a voice as well, to say like in some classes, like in some tutorials, to really like voice my opinions, and also believe in them, to say like, I really think, based upon the research I've done, the films I've watched, the time I put into this craft, and like also my new perspective of the world, that I have something important to say. And so how does that translate into what I do now, or like where did that get taken? If you look at a lot of different roles, a lot of different jobs across different industries, people are frequently like looking for people's opinions. And how you voice them. And people who are very passionate about things. So a direct connection for me is like working in the tech world right now. I'd say I work pretty close to like a product-ish role. And for those like not in the know, like, being a product manager or product owner, typically like you have to have be very passionate about how something is supposed to work. And so for me, that's a direct connection back to those days where I'm like, I feel I'm very apt to say like, this is how this should work, or this is my point of view, how this should be happening. Another thing I think like just that I pulled out of like my cinema study times, I guess, is I think also being like pretty open-minded. I think just watching a lot of films, you see a lot of things, you experience a lot of feelings, like, but things that I saw a bunch of films that otherwise like I would have never been exposed to, and through those, like, as cheesy as it sounds, like, really learn that being open-minded is really a really strong actually tool to help you kind of both like in my personal life, but also in my career. And what you also notice is that people can't do that. Sometimes it's very obvious that things can be a lot more challenging when you're not able to really adapt and like be open to change, be open to new things, different perspectives. So I think that's like another thing that really I've really pulled from my time at CSI.
Okay, and then my final question, and then we'll turn it over to Q&A. I'll blather for a minute because I can't not. But is, what do you wish you had done differently as an undergraduate where you are now? Like, what would have, what do you wish had gone differently? What do you wish you had done differently? What courses do you wish you had taken? What things do you wish you had done?
I think I would have. I was never quite satisfied with my final papers, and I think that sometimes it was because I was trying very hard to write about something that no one else had written about, rather than like, and sometimes like it was just like, oh, it needs to be original, it needs to be like a new thing. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was writing a lot about gaming, because there was like less of that at the time, like intersections of film aesthetics and video game aesthetics. But I do kind of wish I had done deeper dives on just like a movie I really liked. Like really just live with, like, I feel like the one thing I actually didn't do is like live with one text for a very long time, and really unpack it. Every year I'm away from the 35mm archive, I just regret not playing another movie or coming up with another supplementary. U of T and CSI in general, like it's a time where you can really dig into the thing that just genuinely interests you, and so like focus on what genuinely interests you, and then in doing so, I think you will be more comfortable speaking out about it, because you'll realize, oh, I actually do know more about this stuff than other people in the room.
This is a very Scorpio response. I don't wish I did anything differently, because while I find that, of course, like if we look back, it's like, did I want to party more? No, I had a really good time. I don't have any regrets about my time spent there. I think I really did. In the beginning, I was really quiet, similar to like how Brandon was talking about finding your voice. Like I did by the end of my time at U of T, I found my voice. I forced Corinne Collimpar to watch new French extremity films, and she hates horror films because I refuse to write about anything else. Don't worry about it. If you're in school right now and you're like, I don't know where my career's headed, that's okay. Just like follow your gut, do the things you want to do, work too much while you're in school, like get everything done if you can, if you have the bandwidth for it, do it all. I remember I cried once in film criticism class with Jason Anderson. I told him this. There was like a really heated debate in class about the movie Shame. And I got so upset. I had to leave because I didn't like the movie. I think I was the only like naysayer to the film. I was like, this film's so problematic, and I had to like go outside and have a cry. But that's okay. Like even my cringy moments, I've learned from. So I don't have any regrets.
I feel like there are things that I did that I was super, super proud of now, like coming out of cinema studies. And part of it, I think, just goes on the same line. It's like, what Lindsay and Peter had to mention, like where it's like, really do you sometimes. Sometimes do you like means like, or, following your passion or your interest, or really pushing their piece. Sometimes that means, going to the Boys in the Hood screening. Who knows? Maybe drinking a 40 ounce in the theater with your friends while you're watching it. I don't know. Maybe that happened once. Who knows? There's no cannabis in there, but living your best life as a young film cinema studies student, because as you know, and a lot of people in the program, when you talk to people and they're like, so you get to watch films for school, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess it seems pretty cool in comparison, and it really was. It was pretty special. I think what I would have done differently though is I definitely would have liked to treat my earlier years of school, but specifically like my cinema studies like career, like a job. I think that's what I would have done differently. And what that means is like really showing up. Every class that I'm going to, you're sitting there listening to somebody, whether it's a professor or another student or a TA, talking for quite a long time. It's maybe on you or to you to put your thoughts out there, or like to really maybe challenge the status quo sometimes. And I know it's like super intimidating. Like I can think back to like first year, second year, hell, like up until third year, until your classes get like a lot smaller in your fourth year, where it's intimidating sitting in that auditorium full of people, and the instructor says something and you're like, I don't really agree with that. Or like, somebody asks like, hey, does anyone have any questions? And you're like, I'm just gonna not really say anything about this. What do you got to lose? You're not gonna get fired. So there's not really too much. What's the worst that can happen? Is put it that way. So I really wish I had showed up a bit more in my earlier years of school, because at the end of the day, that's what we're there for. That's is to really to challenge ideas and to talk critically about concepts.
Awesome. As someone who like very nearly failed out of undergrad myself, maybe I put too much pressure on the like, what would you have done differently? Like maybe I wouldn't have failed all those classes, but it's also proof that like you can fail classes and then still become a professor at U of T. It's like, it happens. Okay, so I'm going to do a very brief blather just to sort of draw out some things that I think are really interesting and important and timely. So part of this too just comes from what you were saying, Brandon, which is take some chances. There's like that I know that everything feels very high stakes. But actually university is a place where you can try, and Peter, you were saying this too, you can try stuff out and it doesn't work and that's okay. So take your chances, nobody's going to fire you. I also think, and this is related, and Lindsay, you were really pushing on this, but I think this is also definitely a part of your story, Brandon, is that the importance of sort of like not knowing where you're going and following where, reading the room, reading your situation and responding to it, that it isn't necessarily a like, I have a plan, I'm going to execute on that plan, things will happen. And part of it is just being aware of the chances you have in front of you and doing it. Another thing that I like to hammer home to my students, so those of you who are in the room, probably you've heard me say this before, but like, just do the things. Like, if you want to make a movie, make a movie. Like, it might not be great. It might not be on a budget. If you want to write film criticism, just publish in the Varsity. If you want to program things, just do it. And if you don't quite know how to do the thing yet, there are resources here, people who will tell you how to do it. Like, if there's a thing you want to do, talk to somebody who might help you figure out how to do it, but just do it. I also, two other things that are related. So originality, this is Peter, your point, but I actually think like originality isn't all that important. You don't have to figure out how to say something no one else has ever said before. You need to figure out how to say what you mean and what you care about and what you're interested in. And that's more important than trying to figure out like, oh, well, and I know that I have some students who are like, I can't possibly, like, Laura Mulvey already said the thing, I can't add anything to it. And it's like, no, you don't need to add to it in the sense that like, what you need to do is figure out what you care about and express that. Originality is not the thing. Find your niche. That's like related advice, which is by driving what you're interested in, you will find that niche. And then finally, one final, like, I can connect this, and then just two other random things, which is the importance of writing. People, you're talking about finding your voice. Speaking is also really important. But Peter, as I said before, in Sin 301, we had Emma Fox, who is a bit younger than y'all, but who is directing episodes of kids TV as her freelance gig right now, and she's saying like, I know how to write a treatment. And I learned that at cinema studies. But I bet, like, writing in any field, what you learn in cinema studies, that's actually incredibly important. So this is a question for Peter from Riley. As someone who really wants to proceed into film festival programming after graduating, and I think you already talked about this, but maybe just draw some lines under some things. What particular skills from your undergrad and grad programs did you find most helpful? Or like, if there was a student currently wants to work on film festival programming, what would be the like one or two most important things that you would tell them to do?
The gateway for most festivals to get into programming tends to start with pre-screening positions, where festivals will be some festivals are actually like advertised postings for it. Other festivals won't openly about it, but so the first step is start volunteering for festivals. That's a really great way to expose yourself to a network of the people who work for the festivals, both small and even larger. And then secondly, oftentimes these pre-screening jobs, they will ask to see a writing sample, because what a pre-screener does for festivals, they're usually the first line of people that are watching the cold submissions, films that have just blindly submitted to the festival, and then a pre-screener watches it, and then they're asked to summarize the film, usually within a paragraph or so, and then they're asked to write critically about the film, about whether or not you think it warrants to be considered by the programming team, and if you don't think it deserves to go on, like why you think that is. And so I think just being able to summarize a movie in a paragraph, I think, is incredibly important. And then it becomes important too in selling the film, because if you want to write a note about a movie, you're going to want to succinctly describe a film and both say what kind of happens in the movie, but also what the movie's about, why it's important, why it's worth seeing. So I mean, that's the key thing too, is really getting a handle on being able to write clearly and articulately about films. That would be the most important thing to focus on. And you mentioned this too briefly, just in terms of just the advice of just doing it. But yeah, like, you know, don't even wait for a venue. Like, honestly, if you have a projector or even a nice TV, you just invite people to your house and like do a festival in your house, in your apartment. Like, I did that with a friend for a while too. I mean, all the way back in high school, I would just not go out for lunch. I would just ask the economics teacher if we can just use the TV and I can show my friends these John Woo movies I had discovered. So like, that just starting there, and then like make it a regular thing, and then like come up with challenges for yourself or programming blocks for yourself. Like, I want to only program these movies, or even if it's something you don't even know about, use as an opportunity to learn about it. Like for me personally right now, I don't know that much about Indian cinema, but I'm obsessed with it. I find it super interesting. I have for the last couple of years, and I'm now actively, like, with my friends, we have like a regular, like every 2 weeks we'll pick a different movie to watch, and one of us will research the movie, and then Todd will introduce it to everybody. So like, you know, it's like having a book club, but you can do that with film. And I think that's a really great way to hone your skills. And the more you do it, the more people hear about it. Eventually someone at a festival is going to hear about it and go like, I hear this person does this thing. They'd be a great pre-screener. Let's have them be a pre-screener. And then boom, you're in, you know, that's a version of how I was able to get into film festivals.
YY has a question that is, I guess, where did you find research and intern opportunities? Which is to say, like, how did you go about finding, I mean, did any of you do internships?
I did an internship that I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but but I made it work. But so I think I wrote about this for CSI once. There's like an article on their website somewhere called "Garbage Man in Can." If you Google it, you probably will be able to find it. The short of it is there's an organization called the American Pavilion that is at the Cannes Film Festival, and they run a program that you pay them to be an intern. Basically, the fee covers your accommodations. It gets you a badge for the festival, so it's not like you're not getting anything for it. It gives you breakfast in the morning, though it's like, I think, just a croissant and ham. And anyway, the reason why I don't really recommend it is that the internships are kind of a crapshoot, and most of them are really bad. Some of them are literally working in the restaurant that they own. So it's like, it's kind of a scam. I mean, but I really seized the opportunity there because they basically gave me a garbage man job. I had to collect recycling while I was in Cannes, and you would think, oh my God, I was so disappointed. And kind of I was initially disappointed, but then I was like, wait, I'm in Cannes and I have no responsibilities beyond filling a garbage bag by the end of the day. Great. I'm now going to also just leverage this by going into, I hit up all the offices, and when they'd ask like why I was there, I was like, oh, I'm just collecting the recycling. But then I'd mention that, yeah, I work for this other film festival in Toronto, small one, and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I was able to have conversations with people and see movies and stuff like that. So I guess the advice is that, you know, there are internship possibilities out there, apply to them, but even if it's bad, find an opportunity to make it good. And if there are no opportunities, then don't do the internship, but like find, you know, focus instead on doing something for yourself. But if you are confronted with a bad one, initially scope out if it still gives you access or gives you, you know, leverage to do something that you actually do want to do. But yeah, that was if you Google garbage man in Cannes, I think it's somewhere on Google on the internet where you can read the whole story about my experience.
You know, as far as research opportunities, there's the Jackman Humanities Institute runs a scholars in residence program where you can do research with faculty, but honestly, like, find out what the faculty in cinema are researching and talk to them. It's like, if I had a student come into my office and was like, I'm interested in researching and what I work on, you know, like digital media, early graphical computer systems, you're like, cool, like, absolutely, let's talk about it. And I can give you some ideas for what that research might be. And it could lead to things like independent studies. It might not lead to paid employment because, you know, faculty have specific granting roles, but it can't hurt to ask. And that's, again, I think part of it too, some of this is like just putting yourself out there, of like, the worst that happens if you walk into a faculty member's office, you're like, I'm interested in your research, is that probably the worst thing that would happen is that the faculty member would filibuster for 20 minutes and not let you get a word in edgewise. And then you leave like having been talked at for a while without any much else there, but like, that's not a bad outcome. Okay. I'm surprised we don't have more questions. So please, if you have questions, big or small, short or tall.
On the subject of internships too, like, I mean, there's less of them than there used to be, but there's still got to be like 60 at least film festivals in the city that like almost every weekend there is a film festival or some type of film event that honestly, if you just reach out and say like, is there anything I can do? Do you guys have any internships? Sometimes they don't post them, but honestly, I would cold email. A good friend of mine really started their career that way too, where they just, look, I mean, if you get a TIFF program book sometimes, or industry book, sometimes you just go to the back of the book and there's just an index of all the Canadian companies and just write to them and be like, got any internship positions? A lot of them will, more than you would expect, would actually go back, yeah, actually. And then you can then, as Brandon say, vet of like, wait, is this for me? No, I don't actually want to do this. And it's okay. It's okay to walk away from something that's a waste of your time or not respecting your time. Definitely do something, I think it's also very important to find something that can sustain you so that you have the opportunities to do things that you want to do. And that might be a job that is, just a minimum wage job. But at the same time, if something's going to be occupying all your time and it's not helping you, don't be afraid to walk away from it.
That just reminded me too, like I would take off work for like a week during hot docs to volunteer. And that's how I got my entry level positions at film festivals. So like I did first year volunteer hot docs. The next year I was working the box office. I actually don't think I ever volunteered at TIFF because I met someone through hot docs, but I did also volunteer for Toronto After Dark. And then the next year I talked to Adam about, so like, yeah, you can always, with school, if you got a break, like winter break, etc. If there's a film festival happening in your off season, you take some time off work to volunteer. That's such a great way to, like Peter was saying, to like, meet industry folks and just be in that setting. And it can lead to some gigs. So
if you ever show up to if you ever get invited to a meeting, show up early too. Just always show up early, because what inevitably happens is other people will show up late. The meeting will start a little bit late and it'll give you FaceTime with people that are in higher positions than you, and they'll just remember you. They're like, yeah, that guy showed up. I mean, honestly, that's why I got the pre-screening job for Toronto After Dark, because Adam was the director of that festival, was organizing these meetings, and I was always showing up like 10 minutes early. So I would just talk to him for like 10 minutes before it started, and that's when he was just like, do you want to pre-screen? Because like, this conversation's great. You've been demonstrating that like you're passionate and interested in this stuff. So like, show up to meetings early.
Brandon, I have a question for you. I used to work in the tech industry before going to grad school. But that was like before going to grad school, right? So that was like a long time ago. George W. Bush was still president. We had not yet gone to war in Iraq, kind of thing. But I'm wondering, like a lot of this conversation is about like getting started in film festivals, but it does seem important to me to recognize that like a lot of the students in cinema studies might not go into the film world. The tech world is often a place where people land. Do you have advice on how to get started, not as a coder in the tech industry, but as someone with a liberal arts degree? What would your first steps be after you graduate?
Yeah. That's a great question, because I think it took me a little bit of time to find my footing in some of those conversations. So I think the most obvious one that I would say to people here, and I think this is like just like a challenge that you come up across, is like you see a job, maybe it's entry level at a company that you want to work for, which I'll return to that concept in a moment, but like at a company that you want to work for. And you're immediately like, okay, so this is asking me for experience with X, Y, and Z. Like, I have a cinema studies degree, so how do I even make this translatable to the person reading this resume? And I would say that there's so much, or there's definitely a good amount of work that you should spend doing, which I think comes from different avenues, some self-discovery, like really, trying a few things out, volunteering, having conversations with people, etc. But like really taking that avenue to like understand, how you can make your skills and the things that you learned at school, and your passions translatable to what people are asking you to do.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay, Brandon, Peter. Thank you, Denise. Thank you to the NSAV team. I am so grateful that we could come and talk about this. And I think with that, our webinar should be completed. Have a lovely weekend.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next one. Bye.